oh my goodness, this is rather interesting that Sue Bird has brought this up to Kelsey Mitchell in light of some of the drama from a couple of days ago when Stephanie White was very clear and there was no confusion looking at anybody out there, including people on YouTube, that may think that was misconstrued, even though Stephanie White is the one that said these things. And I'm not going to go after specific YouTubers because that's not what I do. But the idea that people weren't going to take her words literally.
Stephanie White's words hit like a wrecking ball. The Indiana Fever's head coach declared Kelsey Mitchell the team's absolute priority, setting off a firestorm that nobody saw coming. But here's what the media got completely wrong. This wasn't about player conflict. This wasn't about ego clashes or locker room drama. The real shocker. Kelsey Mitchell just broke her silence on Sue Bird's podcast, and what she revealed flips the entire narrative on its head. The supposed feud between Mitchell and Caitlin Clark. It never existed. The relationship shocker everyone's been talking about. It's between management's questionable decisions and the undeniable chemistry these players actually share. If you've been watching this saga unfold and felt like something wasn't adding up, you were absolutely right. The story behind the story reveals a disconnect so massive it threatens to derail the most exciting team in women's basketball. And if you believe the real truth matters more than manufactured headlines, smash that like button right now. It tells us you're here for the actual investigation, not the noise. Let's start with what actually happened, because the context changes everything. Stephanie White made a statement that sent shockwaves through the WNBA community. She said the organization was building around Kelsey Mitchell. On the surface, that sounds like a coach supporting her veteran star. But when you have a generational, Jordan-like talent in Caitlin Clark on your roster, that statement becomes explosive. Fans immediately asked the obvious question: how do you prioritize building around anyone other than the player who literally changed the trajectory of your entire franchise? The comparisons to basketball history were immediate and brutal. The Chicago Bulls didn't build around Scottie Pippen. They built around Michael Jordan. The Portland Trail Blazers centered their system on Clyde Drexler, not Terry Porter. The Boston Celtics built their dynasty around Larry Bird, not Kevin McHale. Every successful franchise in basketball history has known one fundamental truth. When you have transcendent talent, you build everything around that talent. So why would the Indiana Fever seemingly choose a different path?
The building around Kelsey Mitchell that I took issue with, because you got a generational Jordan-like talent on this team in Caitlin Clark. The Bulls did not choose to build around Scottie Pippen. All right? Look, the Blazers weren't building around Terry Porter. They were building around Clyde Drexler. I mean, the Knicks weren't building around Anthony Mason or John Starks or Derek Harper. They were building around Patrick Ewing. We could go on.
This is where the narrative started spiraling. Social media exploded. YouTube channels dissected every word. Fans felt betrayed. Many of you have been saying this for weeks. Something doesn't feel right about how the Fever's management is handling their generational opportunity. The organization appeared to be making a strategic error of historic proportions, choosing loyalty to an established player over maximizing the potential of a once-in-a-generation talent who had already proven she could transform not just a team, but an entire league. Then Amber Cox, a key voice within the Fever organization, doubled down. She publicly confirmed that re-signing Kelsey Mitchell was unequivocally the organization's top priority. In isolation, that's a logical statement for a star player approaching free agency, but in the shadow of Stephanie White's earlier comments, it sounded less like routine management and more like a confirmation of a questionable strategic direction. The optics were terrible. The timing was worse. Fans and analysts alike began questioning whether the Fever truly grasped the unique responsibility they had. Caitlin Clark didn't just bring unprecedented attention to the franchise, she brought legitimacy, revenue, sold-out arenas, and a national spotlight the WNBA had never experienced at this scale. The idea that management might not fully understand this moment felt incomprehensible, but the statements kept reinforcing that perception. Here's where it gets interesting, and where we need to filter out the noise and look at what actually happened. Because while the media was busy constructing a narrative of conflict, jealousy, and locker room tension, the players themselves were living a completely different reality. Many of you picked up on this. You noticed the on-court chemistry. You saw the genuine celebrations after big plays. You recognized that something didn't match between what was being reported and what was actually visible during games. Enter Sue Bird's podcast, A Touch More. Bird, one of the most respected voices in women's basketball, brought Kelsey Mitchell on to discuss the challenges of navigating intense public scrutiny and shifting team dynamics. The setup was simple. How do you deal with the narratives when someone as transformative as Caitlin Clark joins your organization? But Mitchell's response wasn't what anyone expected if they'd been buying into the manufactured drama. Mitchell acknowledged the reality. Yes, there are narratives. Yes, social media amplifies everything. Yes, people sometimes overlook the contributions of established players when a superstar rookie arrives. But here's what she didn't do. She didn't blame Caitlin Clark. She didn't express resentment. She didn't validate any of the conflict theories that had been swirling for months. Instead, she spoke with understanding, maturity, and genuine respect for what Clark brings to the team.
In your locker room. So what do you think, or do you feel like people sometimes just like overlook your leadership specifically and your impact on the team from like a chemistry standpoint, because there's just so many narratives? So like, do you think people are overlooking that?
I think that in a short, yeah. I think naturally, yes, because of the society, the social media, and how bad, people take to social media and abuse it in the wrong realm of light. And so I think that's one part of it. But I also think that
covering basketball teams is now abusing.
You were onto something when you noticed the disconnect between media narratives and actual player behavior. Mitchell's words on that podcast painted a picture completely different from the public perception. She talked about the necessary adjustment period everyone faced when Clark arrived. But her tone wasn't resentment, it was appreciation. She understood that when someone with that level of impact joins an organization, everyone has to adapt. Not because of ego, but because the entire ecosystem changes. The attention changes, the expectations change, the media scrutiny changes, the pressure changes. And according to Mitchell, all of that required significant adjustment, not just for players, but for everyone in the organization, from the front office to the training staff to the entertainment division. This wasn't a player complaining about being overshadowed. This was a veteran professional explaining the reality of organizational transformation. But the most powerful revelation was still coming, and it completely shattered the foundation of every conflict narrative that had been built over the past months. Mitchell was about to say something about Caitlin Clark that would expose just how wrong the media had gotten this entire story. Mitchell talked about how everyone in the organization had to adjust their roles when Clark arrived. The front office, the entertainment division, the training staff, everyone. But then she said something that cut through all the manufactured controversy like a knife. She praised Caitlin Clark's humility. She specifically highlighted that Clark never tried to be bigger than the program, never tried to take over, never acted like the superstar that she undeniably was. Let me pause here because this is crucial, and I need you to weigh in. Drop a comment right now and tell me, did the media completely fabricate this conflict narrative? Because everything we're hearing from the actual players suggests they did. Your perspective matters here. And we want to know if you saw through this manufactured drama from the beginning.
People organization. I felt like at that time there was a lot of, role playing that had to be, situated. I feel like, that when something that big or someone that big who has that much impact comes into something, there are a lot of adjustments that people have to make on the floor, off the floor, in the locker room, in the training room. Just a lot of stuff is a lot of moving parts. And I think the biggest part that I respected about Caitlin is that she never was bigger than a program. I don't know if that makes sense, but like, it wasn't like she wasn't trying to take over. It wasn't.
Think about what Mitchell just revealed. She's praising Clark's character, her team-first mentality, her humility, despite being the most transformative player in WNBA history. This isn't a player harboring resentment. This is a veteran recognizing genuine leadership and respecting how a generational talent handled an impossible situation. Mitchell acknowledged that Clark had every right to come in and demand the spotlight, but she didn't. She integrated herself into the existing structure while simultaneously elevating everyone around her. The on-court evidence backs this up completely. Caitlin Clark and Kelsey Mitchell formed the most dangerous backcourt duo in the WNBA. Clark's ability to control tempo, shoot from deep, and deliver precision passes created opportunities Mitchell exploited with devastating efficiency. Mitchell's microwave scoring ability, her back cuts, her ability to break defenders down off the dribble, it all became exponentially more effective with Clark orchestrating the offense. Together, they were essentially unstoppable. Even individually, each posed problems defenses couldn't solve. But the impact extended beyond Mitchell. Aaliyah Boston thrived in a Stockton-Malone dynamic with Clark, benefiting immensely from having a point guard who consistently found her in optimal positions. The numbers told the story clearly. Boston's production soared when Clark was on the floor and dropped dramatically when she wasn't. This wasn't coincidence. This was a foundational player elevating everyone's game through elite facilitation and court vision. Here's where the story takes a darker turn, and it reveals the real relationship shocker that nobody's been talking about. The disconnect wasn't between players, it was between the organization and its fan base. When Caitlin Clark went down with an injury, the way the Fever handled the situation shattered trust with a massive portion of their audience. Fans felt strung along, led to believe Clark would return soon, purchasing expensive tickets with the explicit expectation of seeing her play, only for her to remain sidelined for an extended period. The anger was palpable and justified. These weren't casual fans. These were people who had invested emotionally and financially in this team because of what Clark represented. They felt deceived, manipulated into spending money under false pretenses. The organization's communication about the injury timeline was vague at best, misleading at worst. This created massive trust issues that extended beyond just the injury situation to every statement management made going forward, which brings us back to Stephanie White's controversial comments about building around Kelsey Mitchell. In the context provided during the podcast discussion, it becomes clear the question was specifically about free agency priorities. Of course, the organization wants to retain Mitchell. Of course, they want to build around their core. The issue wasn't the sentiment. It was the optics of how it was communicated in a climate where fans were already questioning whether management understood the magnitude of what they had in Caitlin Clark. Reading between the lines reveals a more complex truth. The Fever actually have more players locked up than most WNBA teams. Caitlin Clark is still on her rookie deal. Aaliyah Boston is still under contract. Lexi Hall is a restricted free agent, meaning the Fever can match any offer. The core is largely secured. Mitchell's free agency represents the biggest question mark, and from a management perspective, communicating that she's a priority makes sense, but perception matters, especially when you're trying to build America's team. And the Fever's management has fumbled the perception game repeatedly. From the injury communication disaster to strategic messaging that seems tone-deaf to the transformational moment they're experiencing, the organization has created unnecessary controversy around a team that should be universally celebrated for what they've accomplished. Because here's the reality that keeps getting lost in all the noise. The players genuinely like each other. Caitlin Clark's exit interview specifically cited friendship as foundational to their resilience throughout a challenging season. Kelsey Mitchell literally put her body on the line for this team, taking on an unsustainable scoring load when Clark went down, grinding so hard she had to be carried off the court in visible distress. That's not the behavior of someone resentful of a teammate's success. That's the behavior of someone completely committed to the program and her teammates. The talent on this roster is undeniable. Caitlin Clark, first-team All-WNBA, Aaliyah Boston, second-team All-WNBA, Kelsey Mitchell, first-team All-WNBA, three legitimate stars who complement each other perfectly on the court and respect each other off it. The supposed relationship shocker between players was pure fabrication, a phantom conflict manufactured by external pressures and speculative media that obscured the genuine camaraderie that actually existed. The real shocker is the disconnect between what management says and what fans need to hear. It's the gap between organizational decision-making and the historic opportunity sitting right in front of them. The Fever don't have a player problem. They have a messaging problem, a trust problem, and a strategic communication problem that threatens to undermine the most exciting team in women's basketball. If you want to see how this free agency situation unfolds and whether the Fever can finally get their messaging right, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on. We're tracking every development in this story because the implications extend far beyond just one team. This is about how the WNBA handles its biggest stars and whether organizations can rise to meet the moment when transformational talent arrives. Drop your predictions in the comments, hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you in the next investigation. The truth always matters more than the headlines.